These are bright, they're fun, they're bold, they're not even heavy. They are my new favorite earrings. I love them so much. Hello and welcome back to the Little Craft House. Today I am going to be showing you how I'm making my newest obsession. These earrings are bright, they're bold, they're fun. They're not actually very heavy at all, and they use up all the little bits and bobs that I've got laying around in my craft room, and I absolutely love them. So I've got a different design in mind for today, so I thought I would bring you guys along with me. I'm going to be releasing a collection of these really soon with my jewelry business. So going to make another pair today and thought I would show you how I do them. So yeah, let's come along and let's get started. Actually, before we get into it, I am just going to show you a couple of other pairs that I have already made. So this pair here I made about a week or so ago for Reels over on Instagram and for the short section here on YouTube as well. So if you do want to see the quick making of that one, just scroll back a few videos and you'll be able to see that. I also made this pair that I was just wearing. I've done that for Reels as well, so that's also been released over there. They're very quick versions, but today I thought I would show you the more slowed down step-by-step way that I made them. Now, not only did I make those two, I also made this pair here, which I was a little on the fence about. I actually called this pair Tutti Frutti because I had the cherries first. That's where the inspo came from for this pair. And then I was able to add some little charms, bits and pieces of other fruits that I happen to have laying around. So there's a little strawberry on there and there's a little apple as well as those cherries. I think that was all I managed to get on. I later found pineapples, so I might try and see if I can tweak them a little bit to be able to add those little pineapples on as well to make them extra tutti frutti. I know these big earrings aren't for everyone, but they're definitely so much fun to make and I really enjoyed it. So that is why I decided that I'm going to do a little bit of a collection. And as usual, I want to keep them all, but I decided I would keep that top pair there for myself. These other pairs are going to go as part of this new Maximus range of earrings that I'm going to be doing. Right, so first things first, the tools that we need to be able to create. So I've got a bunch of pliers here, including those cutters. I've got a range of flat nose and round nose pliers. I use different ones for different techniques, so I like to have just a range at hand. And I also have these looper pliers as well. These are super cool to use as they create the loop and cut the excess all in one go, but I'll show you more of that later. Okay, I've got some chain. Not sure if I'll be using the chain today, but I've just pulled it out anyway. I actually had no idea what design I was going to work on as I started this, so I'm just grabbing a load of stuff. I've also got the jump rings. They're important. That's what you're going to need to connect everything together. I've got all these little brass connectors, so there's all different shapes. There's the circles, teardrops, ovals, there's some faces, some flowers, some semicircles. I've got a bit of a collection of these. I really enjoy adding that to the pieces. I've also gone and selected a whole bunch of charms. So I'm not sure if you're aware, I own a craft store, so I do have lots of bits and bobs at my disposal. I went through a couple of jars the other day and pulled out just a bunch of bits that I liked and that I thought I might be able to use whilst doing these maxi earrings. And I've also got a bunch of beads. Now these beads, some came from our shop, some I've had for many years, some I've had from my trips to Melbourne and Sydney visiting the bead shops over there. So there's a nice range of beads. I've got a few containers worth. I'm going to pull from all of them. Depending on what gets me inspired and which way I tend to go with these designs. Now I also have these little cute daisy flowers. I also used those the other week for a different pair of earrings and I just really like them. They are small and dainty, and as I've been sorting through things, I've seen the bees and then those little flowers. So I think this is where my design for today is going to come in. I think I would like to use these little daisies. The bees are gold, so we might go a full gold theme. And yeah, I'm just going to see what else jumps out at me along the way. Now, another important finding that we're going to need is these pins. So these ones are a flat end, so they're a head pin, and I also have a range of eye pins as well, and they're the ones that have the little loops on the end already. So they come in handy for joining things for the hanging and also for layering. So I've got a range of colours there. I'll be using the gold ones today because we're going to go with a gold theme for this pair of earrings. Now, I've also got a bunch of other little charms and things that I've got stashed in here. So I'm just going to pull out what kind of jumps out at me with this golds, florals, the bees, and then I'm going to grab everything out that I like in one go, and then we'll work out from there what we'll use, what we won't use. I've always been a really big fan of sorting through things as well. So as a kid, I love sorting through the Lego. I've got big jars of buttons that I just love sorting through and finding. So I really like just going through all of my charms and finding things that all match up and go well together. Something that I mentioned earlier as well is that I'm not focused on these earrings being identical matching pairs. They don't have to be symmetrical, they can be a little bit odd as long as every element complements each other. So that's why I'm sort of going with more of a colour theme. And as I'm sorting through, I'm kind of finding that those pinks and whites and the golds go nicely together. So that's where today's theme ends up coming in. This style of design is also really good because I do end up with lots of odd bits and pieces. Sometimes packets come and they have odd numbers in them. Sometimes I'll use one piece for a keyring or something that doesn't need two pieces, and so you end up with the odd ones left. Sometimes things break or they get misplaced or lost or borrowed by the children, and yeah, you just end up with odds. So I think this design is really good for using up those odd pieces as well. Because I'm using the bees, I've grabbed out a little hexagon shape there. I thought that might work. I think that yellow flower was a bit too chunky, so I've just chucked him to the side, and I've also found a couple of tassels. I didn't have any matching tassels, so I'm going to have to go with odds for those. And then in this container here, I spotted this big pink flower. Now that goes in really well with the colour theme, but I don't know if it's going to be too big. That big pink leaf that I have as well that's sitting there, that's the only one that I had of that, so that is going to have to be an odd as well. And then I've just grabbed those beads back, and I'm just going to find some colours that work well with those golds, pinks and whites. And a bit of sparkle is always good, so those little crystally glass beads, they're going to look really nice in, give a nice little sparkle as well. This style of earring is definitely not a quick one to achieve. These take me ages to make, mainly because I do like to fiddle around and find all those components. So I suppose if I was a little bit more intentional on what I had from the start, it might be a quicker process. But yeah, they do take quite a while to put together because I'm just kind of deciding along the way as I'm going. I'm also finding other containers of supplies and going, oh, that might work, that might work. So this has got some pink ones in it. They might work, they might not. I used these the other day in a design, so I think I might steer away from those, but they are an option for if I do need some extra little elements. And when it comes to the base pieces that we're going to use for the top, I've got some polymer that I'm going to use. Now, I'm just popped in this little time lapse here of me making one of the designs. Again, I did this for a reel over on Instagram, but I thought I would share it here because I'm going to use that today as my main feature piece. So it was just a really simple design that I put together with some colours, scrap colours I think they were actually, but they worked really nicely. It's got the pink and it's got the white and the little flicks of gold in it, so I think that is going to work really nicely with those colours that we've chosen today. Sometimes when I make the polymer clay designs, I don't cut them up straight away because I'm not 100% sure what I'm going to use them for. That's when it comes in handy because I have them at the side ready to go. I have a couple of extra ones here as well, so I was undecided which ones I was going to use today. This one here I did has a half stripe, half checkerboard, and then I've got that retro pattern as well. I might be able to use those today at the end for some extra designs, but I think we're just going to focus with this one today. The next hard choice is deciding what shape to make that main feature piece. I really liked working with the arch in this one. That worked really well. It was able to have the couple of pieces hanging underneath, but because I've used the arch already, I thought I might go with something a little different. So I've got these two floral cutters. I like the idea of hanging pieces from each of those little drops. So I think I will cut some pieces out with those, and we'll see once they're baked up which ones I like best and which ones will work with. So because I've left this design to the side for a couple of days, it has firmed up a little bit. I've just popped it on the tile and given it a quick little roll that just to help kind of soften it a little bit. Also will help it to bond to the tile for making this cutting process a little bit easy. I did grab the circle cutter and I thought I will cut out some semicircle pieces just because I do enjoy working with the semicircle, but I don't want them all to be semicircles. So I will go with these floral ones as well. Other than that quick little snippet before that I showed you of me making this polymer clay design, I haven't really gone into the details on doing polymer clay for this tutorial. If you're new around here, welcome, and if you're interested in learning more about polymer clay and making polymer clay designs, please check out my channel because that is what I usually focus on. So I usually have lots of different polymer clay tutorials showing how to do different designs, and they are definitely all suitable for beginners, even if you've never done polymer clay work before. But today, because I wanted to mainly focus on the beading element of it, I thought I would just show you from the cutting stage of this design. So once all these pieces are cut out and I am happy with them, I'm going to pop them into the oven to cure. I do it at about 130 degrees for approximately an hour. Before I put it in the oven though, I am going to cut this circle in half. I could use a semicircle cutter, but I found just using a circle and cutting it in half is easy enough. So that's what I'm doing for that one. So there we go. And looking at them with those beads above, I think these colours really do match in nicely together. So I'm really happy with how these are going to look. So now that those pieces are in the oven, we've got a bit of time to start working on putting all of these elements together. So I wasn't quite sure where I was going to get started, so just go with the simple thing first, adding a jump ring to the tassels. It's a bit hard to see in this video and I didn't really zoom in on it, but the way the tassel is made, there is a slight little gap in it which you can force that jump ring into to be able to then attach the ring on. Try not to slip like I did there, sorry for bumping the camera. And I've just attached that little charm over the top as well. So that's our first piece done. Now I need to try and work out what order I'm going to put the rest of these beads in. And I also need to decide if I want some of the pieces to be longer and some bits shorter, or whether I want them all to be about even. So it usually takes me quite a while to work out how I'm going to place these pieces. It's important to remember as well that the pieces may end up being a little bit longer than what they are being laid out flat like this, because once I add them onto my little pins and then add the loops and join the loops together, it's going to add extra length to it as well. So I have been caught out with that before, so I need to make sure that I'm really aware that that can happen. Another thing to take into consideration with this style of earring is the weight of them. So the pairs of earrings that I was wearing in the beginning, they weren't that heavy at all. However, the weight can add up quite quickly when you start adding lots of beads. So just be aware of which beads you're choosing and how many you're putting onto your design and the weight that that is then adding as well. Things like these little daisy beads and the tassels and the little spacer beads that I have, they don't weigh much at all. So these ones are pretty easy to work with, and this won't be a very heavy pair of earrings. Once I've threaded all my beads onto this pin, that is where we now need to add our little loop on the top. So there's a couple of ways you can do this. I've got my little loop pliers here. As I mentioned before, they are a bit of a game changer when it comes to jewellery making. It makes things a lot easier. But if you don't have them, there is the old manual way, which I'll show you that in just a second as well. These loop pliers actually cut your pin and then add the loop all in one step. So I'm not having to change between tools, it just does it in that one nice clean motion. And then I just give it a little wiggle to release the pin. And that one's done, which is really good and really handy. Now, one thing as well with as we're creating those little top loops, I don't throw any of those pins away because I can create loops on the bottom of those and then they will become shorter pins to use at another time. Another little top tip that I have for jewellery making, whether it be opening the eyes of these eye pins like I just did, or even jump rings, is to twist them open rather than pulling them open. This means that you can twist it back into position and they should close up nice and tight again, as opposed to if you pull it open, you don't always get a nice tight closure on it. So yeah, I like to twist those openings. I showed you how to do the tops with the loop apply before. Now I'm going to show you how to do it manually if you're doing it by hand. Now I grabbed the pliers here, but I actually shouldn't be cutting at this stage. What I need to do first is grab my flat nose pliers and I'm going to bend the pin at the very top of the bead. That is going to secure all those beads in nice and tight there. They're not going to be able to work their way up the pin as we're working on it. Now I'm able to cut it off, trim that down, and I want about 1 centimetre of pin to work with. And then I'm going to grab my pliers. Now I'm using those flat nose pliers. You can use either the flat nose or the round nose. And the flat nose is going to do more of a, I suppose, a more flat shape, flat edge, more of an oval, as opposed to if I'd picked up my round nose pliers and done it with those, that would have been a much nicer rounder loop, but instead it's a bit more of an oval shape. And really it's just because they're the ones that I just grabbed then because they were close to me. I probably should have grabbed those round nose pliers. Don't worry though, because I will play around with that little loop afterwards and I'll squish it a little bit and it'll make it nice and round. I've just popped this now into fast speed so that you can still watch me putting these pins together, but you don't have to watch it in real time. As I mentioned before, it does take a really long time doing these designs, especially when I decide to change my mind halfway through it. But I'm not doing that at the moment. I'm going steady. I've got a plan. I've laid them all out how I want them to be. So yeah, I'm just going to work through it for a bit. Another thing I should mention as well about those little loops on the top of the pins, later on we may need to twist them around a little bit because depending on which way that charm at the bottom is facing, we may need to just twist those loops just to make them face the opposite direction so that our charms hang straight. So as I'm finishing off this one here, I do switch to having the round nose pliers, but I've left it in fast speed still just because I kind of made it go a little bit wonky and it didn't actually end up being the best loop to demonstrate with, so I'm using my flat nose just to straighten it up a little bit. But you can see how it's just that little bit more rounder than what the flat nose ones were. Okay, so as I am assembling these, you'll see here that I did actually film a little example of the opening of the jump rings. It's barely in shot, but you'll see how I grab those pliers and I twist it. So twisting open to join on the extra pace, and then with the pliers, I'm just going to twist it closed, and then it will meet up perfectly and nice and straight without distorting that little ring. So that's what I was talking about earlier, about the twisting of the loops rather than just pulling them apart. And I do have to apologise that this is off screen. I kind of get carried away as I was making these and forget that I've got the camera on and that I should be in shot. Another thing worth mentioning is that I always try and use 2 pairs of pliers. Otherwise, I end up putting pressure on my fingernails and therefore chip my nails. Or if I'm using the polymer or even some of the wood pieces, if you put the pressure onto that instead of using a secondary pair of pliers, you end up risking breaking those elements because they're just not made to have that pressure put on them. And the jump rings that I use are a 1mm in thickness, so they are quite thick and quite sturdy, so they don't just open really easily like some of the thinner ones do. So I'm just arranging all my charms now to work out how I want them to be laid out, and I'm just keeping in mind which of the dangly bits is going to be heavier, because I want the heaviest piece to be in the middle so that our earrings sit straight. Sometimes when I've made these other earrings, and also when I've done similar style of earring, I'll need to play around and just assemble them, see how they sit, and then maybe change some of the elements. I'm just having a look here just to work out which topper I want to use. I do really like this one with the 3 little drops. I think that one's going to work well. And I'm going to add linking rings behind, because I find that just kind of adds a little bit extra to fill it up and just, fill the space and just add that extra something behind. I've also got some acrylic circles here, which I've already pre-glued, so I'll be able to use those as the toppers. But before I can start assembling, I do need to drill the holes. So I've got my pieces here, and I've got a little wood board that I use to drill on. I've got my Dremel, and that's got the smaller drill bit in it here. So that's going to make a hole that's about 1.5mm big. That's my preferred size. And then I'm just going to make sure that the sound is down as I'm doing this, because it is quite noisy. And I'm just going to drill through in each of those positions. So I feel like I'm pretty good at eyeballing now where a hole needs to go and making it nice and even. So I don't do any sort of pre-hole templates or anything like that. If you're worried about where the holes are going to go, you can always turn it over and just mark with a marker of some sort, pencil, or even just a little pin to put a marking of where you want the holes to go, just to make sure that you've got them lined up properly. But I think I do a pretty good job without needing that. All right, so my drill is in the way. There we go. I don't know if you can see those holes now, but 1 on each drop and 1 at the top. It's probably easier to show you from the back. So now we can start assembling them. I'm just grabbing out my 8mm jump rings here. So the jump rings that I've used in the dangle pieces with the pins and things, if I'm just doing like a pin to pin, I'll just use a smaller, maybe 6mm jump ring. If I'm doing like a charm to a bead and I can use a 6, I will. But because we're going through the polymer, which is about 3mm in thickness, I'm going to use the 8mm jump rings. And again, these ones are that 1mm thick, so they're nice and strong, and I definitely don't want to put the pressure against my pieces, so I am using the 2 pliers to close them. I think at this point my head was about to explode. Wasn't sitting right, this piece. That's why I'm kind of playing around. I wish I kind of had moved my hand down a little bit so you could see what I mean. But the pin's kind of twisted and it's also on back to front. So I need to reopen up that jump ring and turn it around so that that bottom charm, this was so much more difficult than it needed to be. And then I dropped the piece. Very frustrated at this point and just trying to work out which way it's going to sit. Right, there we go. I think that's better. Close it up. Let's go. Okay, so now that's straight. That's better. That's what we want. All right, on to the next piece. So this process is quite fiddly, just because all your jump rings and everything are so small and we're going to start layering. The other thing, like I was talking about before, is that I'm not quite sure how these are going to sit weight-wise. So even though I'm putting them on at the moment, I do know that I may have to change it around in a minute if this tassel piece is too light for the center, or rather the other pieces are too heavy for the end. I want it to sit straight and the tassel just doesn't really have any weight to it. I did add the little glass bead above just to try and put a bit extra weight there, so I'm hoping that's going to have done the trick. But yeah, we're not going to be able to tell until afterwards. But I do like the way the tassel looks being in the middle. So I'll just add that third piece on and then I'll just sort of see how it sits. And I did it again. I put this pin on back to front, so I'm going to have to undo it again. I think it's because each of these beads is double-sided except for the little charm on the bottom, and as it gets hooked up I'm thinking I've got it the right way, but I actually don't. So yeah, that's a little bit frustrating, but I just need to be a bit more careful, I think, and check the first time. Right, that's definitely much better and I really like the way that that looks. That's awesome. So then the final piece of this one here, I just need to add that topper on. So yeah, as I mentioned before, this is just an acrylic top. It's a gold mirror acrylic and I've already glued my pin on, my post on as well at the back. So that's got the metal post on it. I'll close that one up there. And I'm half done because I still need to do the other one, but that's all right. I'll do that one in a minute off camera, I think. Now, with the backings, I would normally use these butterfly backs. It's just my stock standard that I put on the back of all my earrings. But because these ones are a little bit bigger, a little bit heavier, they're not heavy, but they are heavier than my standard ones, I'm going to use these pad backed ones instead, and that's just going to give a little bit extra support behind the ear, just to help stop it from sort of pulling forward if it's too heavy for someone's ears. So here are my finished pair of earrings. How good do they look? They've used up little bits and bobs that I've hoarded around for ages, beads that I have been keeping for special occasions. They're just so much fun and I'm just really enjoying making this style. So anyway, I hope it has inspired you guys to make some maxi earrings as well. Use up all your bits and bobs and just get really creative. They are definitely lots of fun. So thanks for joining me today. I hope you've enjoyed coming along for this little creative journey with me, and I'll be back again next week with another tutorial. So thanks for joining me and I'll see you again then. Bye. Bye.